He had spent 12 years building a grave inside his heart for a bride who never wore his ring, until two desperate widows knocked on his door and taught him that love sometimes arrives wearing mourning black.
Subscribe to Wild Sky Stories. Turn on the bell icon so you can do not miss any new video.
The dust storm had been blowing for 3 days when Clara Maddox saw the cabin through the brown haze. She gripped her younger sister's hand tighter and pulled her forward, their worn boots stumbling over the rocky ground. "Just a little further, Lily," Clara whispered, though her own voice cracked from thirst and exhaustion. Lily Hartwell, barely 20 years old and pregnant with a dead man's child, leaned heavily against her sister. The black mourning dresses they both wore had faded to gray from weeks of travel, and the fabric hung loose on their thin frames. The cabin sat at the base of a small hill, surrounded by a sturdy fence and a barn that looked well maintained, despite its isolation. A few cattle moved restlessly in a corral, and smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth against the cruel October wind. Clara knocked on the door, her knuckles bloody from where she had fallen on the road 2 miles back. She waited, her heart pounding in her chest, praying that whoever lived here would show mercy to two desperate women. The door swung open, and she found herself staring at the barrel of a rifle. "State your business," a deep voice commanded. Clara raised her hands slowly, positioning herself in front of Lily. "Please, sir, we mean no harm. We've been walking for 6 days, and my sister is with child. We only ask for shelter until the storm passes." The rifle lowered slightly, and Clara finally saw the man holding it. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked with gray at the temples, and eyes the color of winter sky. His face bore the weathered lines of a man who had spent years working under the sun, and a thick beard covered his jaw. She guessed him to be near 40, though hardship could age a person beyond their years. His eyes moved from Clara to Lily, then back again. Something flickered across his face, pain perhaps, or recognition of their widow's weeds. "Who are you running from?" he asked. "No one," Clara said quickly. "Our husbands died in a mining accident 3 months past. The company took everything. We've been traveling to find my mother's people in Santa Fe, but the storm caught us, and we lost our way." The man studied them for a long moment. Lily swayed on her feet, and Clara caught her before she could fall. "Please," Clara begged, all pride abandoned. "If not for me, then for my sister and her unborn babe. We'll work for our keep. We'll leave as soon as the weather clears, but if you turn us away, we'll die out there." Something shifted in the man's expression. He lowered the rifle completely and stepped aside. "Come in," he said gruffly. "There's stew on the fire." Clara nearly wept with relief as she helped Lily inside. The cabin was simple but clean, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall and a wooden table and chairs in the center. A narrow bed occupied the far corner, and hooks along the walls held various tools and cooking implements. The man pulled a chair close to the fire and gestured for Lily to sit. Without a word, he took a blanket from the bed and wrapped it around her trembling shoulders. "Thank you," Lily whispered, her voice small and tired. He nodded once, then moved to the fireplace where a cast-iron pot hung over the flames. He ladled stew into 2 tin bowls and set them on the table. "Eat slow," he warned. "If you've been without food, your stomachs won't handle much at first." Clara helped Lily to the table, then took her own seat. The stew was simple, beef, potatoes, and wild onions, but it tasted like heaven to her starving body. She forced herself to eat slowly, watching the man as he moved around the cabin. He seemed uncomfortable with their presence, avoiding their eyes and speaking only when necessary. Yet there was a gentleness in the way he refilled Lily's water cup before she could ask, and how he added another log to the fire when he noticed her shivering. "What's your name, sir?" Clara asked when she had finished eating. "Jebediah Cole," he replied. "Most call me Jeb. I'm Clara Maddox. This is my sister, Lily Hartwell. We're grateful beyond words for your kindness." Jeb grunted in acknowledgement. Storm won't pass for another day, maybe two. You can stay until then. I'll sleep in the barn. We couldn't possibly take your bed, Clara protested. You'll take it, he said firmly. Your sister needs rest, and that child she's carrying needs its mother strong. There was no arguing with his tone. Clara helped Lily to the bed and tucked the blankets around her. Within moments, her sister was asleep, exhaustion finally claiming her. Clara turned to find Jeb watching them with an expression she couldn't read. You've been kind to us, she said softly. Why? Most men would have turned us away or demanded payment of another sort. Jeb's jaw tightened. I'm not most men. He moved toward the door, and Clara noticed a small wooden box on a shelf near the window. It was carved with delicate flowers, clearly made with great care and love. Beside it sat a woman's hairbrush and a small mirror. Your wife's things? Clara asked before she could stop herself. Jeb froze with his hand on the door latch. His shoulders tensed, and when he spoke, his voice was flat and cold. I never had a wife. He was gone before Clara could respond, the door closing firmly behind him. She stood alone in the cabin, confused by his words. Those were clearly a woman's belongings, kept with obvious care. Why would he deny having a wife? The mystery troubled her as she settled into a chair by the fire, determined to stay awake and keep watch over her sister. But exhaustion claimed her too, and she drifted into an uneasy sleep. When Clara woke, gray morning light filtered through the cabin's single window. The fire had been built back up, and fresh water sat in the pitcher on the table. Jeb must have come in during the night without waking them. Lily was still sleeping peacefully, color returning to her pale cheeks. Clara rose quietly and began to explore the cabin, her curiosity about their mysterious host growing. She found more evidence of a woman's presence, a dress pattern tucked into a book, a small bottle of rosewater, a pair of delicate gloves too small for a man's hands. Yet there were no portraits, no letters, nothing to identify who this woman had been. The cabin door opened, and Jeb entered carrying an armful of firewood. He stopped when he saw Clara examining the shelf with the carved box. Storm's letting up some, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Should be clear enough to travel by tomorrow morning. Clara turned to face him. Jeb, I don't mean to pry, but these things clearly belong to a woman. Why do you say you never had a wife? His expression darkened, and for a moment, Clara feared she had pushed too far. But then his shoulders sagged, and he set the firewood down with a heavy sigh. Because I didn't, he said quietly. Not truly. Not in the way that matters. He moved to the fireplace and stared into the flames. Clara waited, sensing that he was wrestling with memories he had kept buried for a long time. Her name was Emmeline, he finally said. We were to be married 12 years ago. She came out from the east to meet me, and we were to wed the day after she arrived. But there was a fever spreading through the territory. She took ill on the journey. She died 3 days after reaching the cabin. We never spoke. Our vows. Clara's heart ached at the pain in his voice. Jeb, I'm so sorry. I built this place for her, he continued, as if he hadn't heard her. Every board, every nail. The carved box was to be my wedding gift to her. She never got to open it. He turned to face Clara, and she saw the depth of loneliness in his eyes. Years of isolation, of grief carried alone. So no, Mrs. Maddox, I never had a wife. I had a dream that died before it could become real. Clara moved toward him without thinking, placing her hand on his arm. But you've kept her things all these years. You've honored her memory. That's not nothing. It's not living either, he said roughly. I've been a ghost in my own life, waiting to join her. Lily stirred in the bed, drawing their attention. She sat up slowly, her hand moving to rest on her rounded belly. Clara? Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Clara assured her, though her mind was still on Jeb's confession. How are you feeling? Better, much better. Lily looked at Jeb with grateful eyes. Thank you for taking us in, Mr. Cole. You've saved our lives. Jeb nodded awkwardly, clearly uncomfortable with gratitude. "There's breakfast on the table. Eat up. You're eating for two now." Over the next 2 days, as the storm gradually cleared, something shifted in the little cabin. Jeb began to speak more freely, drawn out of his shell by Lily's gentle nature and Clara's quiet strength. He told them about his cattle, about the land, about the seasons in this remote corner of the territory. Clara found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, admiring the way he moved with such purpose, the way his rare smiles transformed his weathered face. And she noticed him watching her too, his winter sky eyes warming whenever they met hers. On the third morning, the sky dawned clear and blue. The storm had passed. Weather's good for traveling, Jeb announced at breakfast, but there was no conviction in his voice. Clara looked at Lily, then back at Jeb. A decision had been forming in her mind, one that frightened and thrilled her in equal measure. "Mr. Cole," she began, then corrected herself. "Jeb, my sister and I have been running towards something that might not even exist. My mother's family may have moved on, may have died, may not want us. We have no guarantee of welcome in Santa Fe." Jeb set down his coffee cup, his eyes fixed on her face. "What we do know," Clara continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "is that you've shown us more kindness in 3 days than most people have in 3 months. You have a good home here and good land. You have a life that could use some living in it." "What are you saying?" Jeb asked, his voice rough. Clara stood and moved to stand before him. "I'm saying that if you'd have us, we'd like to stay. Not as charity cases, but as partners. Lily and I can cook and sew and keep house. We can help with the cattle, with the garden. We can bring life back to this place." She took a deep breath and spoke the words she had never expected to say again. "And if you'd have me, just me, I'd like to be more than a partner. I know we've only just met, but I've learned that life is too short and too precious to waste on fear. You've been waiting to join Emmeline, but perhaps you could honor her better by living the life you were meant to share." Jeb rose slowly to his feet. He was so close that Clara could see the rapid pulse in his throat, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You don't know me," he said, but his voice was barely a whisper. "You don't know what you're asking. Then help me know you," Clara replied. "Give me time to learn you. Let me stay." For a long moment he was silent. Clara watched emotions war across his face. Hope battling fear, loneliness struggling against the walls he had built around his heart. Then slowly he reached out and took her hand. "Emmeline would have liked you," he said, and there were tears in his eyes. "She would have wanted me to live." "Then live," Clara whispered. "With us. With me." He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her fingers. It was a promise, a beginning, a crack in the armor he had worn for 12 long years. "Stay," he said, "all of you, for as long as you want. Forever, if you'll have me." Clara smiled through her own tears. "I'll have you, Jebediah Cole. Heaven help me, I will." 6 months later, they stood before a traveling preacher in the cabin that Jeb had built for one woman and now shared with 3. Lily sat in a rocking chair by the fire, her newborn daughter sleeping in her arms. The child's name was Rose Emmeline Hartwell, in honor of the woman whose memory had kept this place alive. Clara wore a simple white dress, and in her hair was a comb from the carved wooden box, Emmeline's wedding gift, finally given to a bride. "Do you take this woman to be your wife?" the preacher asked. Jeb looked at Clara with eyes that had learned to see hope again, to feel joy again, to embrace the life he had almost abandoned. "I do," he said, and when they kissed for the first time as husband and wife, the ghost that had haunted the cabin finally found peace. The woman who had died before her time would have smiled to see her beloved Jeb, surrounded by warmth and laughter and love. That night, as the family sat together by the fire, Jeb held Clara's hand and marveled at how quickly everything had changed. "I told you I never had a wife," he said softly. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "And now you do." "Now I do," he agreed, and his voice was filled with wonder. Now I have everything. Outside, the stars blazed bright over the western sky, and inside the cabin 4 hearts beat as one. The lonely rancher who had spent 12 years waiting to die had finally found a reason to live, and they lived well and fully and together until the end of their days.